She twisted her master key into my truck's lock. Sure, it would work until the alarm screamed. My dash cam blinked on, and 5 minutes later, she was handcuffed on her knees, begging the same cops she had called to fix this mistake. It was supposed to be a peaceful Saturday morning, the kind I looked forward to all week. The weather was just right. Soft sunlight filtered through the oak trees. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and the smell of fresh grass hung in the air. After working a long week at the shop, I finally had time to give my truck a full wash and polish. I had bought this truck, an old Ford F-150A, a project vehicle. It had taken me almost a year to restore it with my own hands. Every dent I pulled, every wire I replaced, every coat of paint I laid down it, all meant something to me. It wasn't just a truck anymore. It was a part of me. By 9 a.m. I had it shining like new. The matte black paint absorbed the morning sun beautifully. I stepped back, sipping my mug of hot coffee, admiring the way the truck sat on the driveway like a proud beast. The chrome rims glinted. The windows were spotless. Even the tires looked brand new after the detailing I gave them. I felt proud. This wasn't just about appearance, it was about effort, and this truck was proof of it. Then, I saw her. From the corner of my eye across the cul-de-sac, Michelle emerged like a storm cloud on a sunny day. Her stiff blonde bob barely moved as she stomped down the sidewalk with her ever-present HOA clipboard in hand. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her. She wasn't just on the Homeowners Association board, she was the board. Self-appointed enforcer of imaginary rules. Michelle lived to scold. Whether it was telling people their lawn was too long, their Christmas lights were too early, or their mailboxes were the wrong shade of white. She had a complaint for everyone. I didn't think much of it at first. She was always out and about on weekends, inspecting people's yards or writing tickets for things that didn't exist. But something felt different this time. She wasn't just passing through, she had a purpose. She stopped at the end of my driveway and just stared at my truck. Her eyes narrowed, scanning every inch of it like she was a customs officer looking for contraband. Then she did something that made me pause. She reached into the pocket of her beige vest and pulled out a jingling set of keys, maybe a dozen of them attached to a big silver ring. I tilted my head. What was she doing? Her eyes flicked back and forth between the keys and the door of my truck, and before I could even process it fully, she walked right up to the driver's side, inserted a key into the lock, and twisted. I froze. The key didn't turn, obviously, because it wasn't her truck. But instead of walking away, embarrassed or even confused, she seemed annoyed, like the truck was being stubborn. She tried again. This time she held the handle as she wiggled the key. The lock didn't budge. The third time she yanked on the door with more force, and that's when the truck's alarm erupted. A loud blaring honk bounced off every house in the neighborhood. My dash cam lit up automatically, starting to record the entire scene. I walked slowly down the driveway, coffee still in hand. I wasn't mad, I was curious. What on earth was she thinking? Can I help you with something? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Michelle jumped, then tried to recover her composure. This vehicle is not registered with the HOA, she said, not even looking at me. We have rules about oversized vehicles and appearance standards, and this one looks suspicious. Suspicious. This truck is mine, I said, eyebrows raised. It's fully registered. I've lived here for 4 years. She huffed. It doesn't matter how long you've lived here. HOA policy says you have to register all vehicles with the board. This one wasn't on file. I thought it was abandoned or illegally parked. You tried to open my door, I said, my voice a bit firmer now. With a key. Michelle actually rolled her eyes. I have the master HOA keys. They're for common property access. Sometimes we need to enforce policy if someone won't cooperate. I blinked, trying to wrap my head around her logic. You thought this truck was HOA property. Well, if it's not legally here, it technically falls under our jurisdiction until it's removed. It was like arguing with a brick wall. A brick wall with a fake badge. Michelle, I said, carefully placing my coffee on the hood of the truck, this is not your jurisdiction. This is my vehicle, on my assigned driveway, and you just attempted to break into it. Her face flushed. She looked around nervously. A few neighbors had peeked out their doors or windows after the alarm went off. One of them had his phone out, clearly recording if you won't move it. Michelle snapped. Then I'll call the police. Go ahead, I said with a shrug. Please do. And that's exactly what she did. She marched back a few steps, pulled out her phone, and dialed 911 like she was reporting a robbery. Yes, hello, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm the HOA president, and I have a suspicious unregistered vehicle here. The owner is refusing to cooperate and may have tampered with HOA locks. I wanted to laugh. Tampered with her key that didn't even fit in my door. I just leaned back on my tailgate and watched the show begin. Little did she know, calling the police would be the biggest mistake she could have made that day. The sirens came faster than expected. Within minutes of Michelle's dramatic 911 call, a black and white cruiser rolled into the neighborhood. Lights flashed, though the siren was turned off by the time it approached. The officer behind the wheel pulled up slowly, parking right in front of my driveway. Michelle straightened up immediately. brushing invisible lint off her blazer and plastering on a face of urgent concern like she'd just survived a crime scene. As the officer stepped out, a tall, calm-looking guy with a notepad and a clear sense that he had seen this type of thing before. Before Michelle practically ran to greet him. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she began, her voice louder than necessary. "This man, he parked an unauthorized, possibly unregistered vehicle in our HOA community. I attempted to confirm ownership with our master keys, but he was hostile and refused to cooperate. I believe this vehicle may be stolen." The officer blinked once and looked at her, then at me, then at the truck. "I see," he said, slowly, and ... "You used a key to try to open the vehicle." "Yes," she replied, confidently, holding up the key ring. "I am the HOA president. These are authorized master keys. We use them for gates, sheds, and shared equipment. When I couldn't gain access, I knew something was off." He nodded again, still calm. "Ma'am, I'm going to speak to the vehicle owner now." She looked slightly thrown off by how neutral his tone was, but stepped aside. I stepped forward, already holding out my ID, vehicle registration, and insurance. "Everything's in order," I said. "This truck is mine. I live right here at Unit 6B. My name's on the title, and I also have dashcam footage if you'd like to see exactly what happened." The officer took the documents without a word and began reading over them. As he flipped through, he glanced at the license plate, then back at the name on my license. A brief nod. "Do you mind if I take a look at the dashcam footage?" he asked. "Not at all," I said, unlocking the door and tapping the screen. "It auto-records when the alarm is triggered. This should show her approaching, attempting to unlock it, and then calling you." He watched the footage quietly. Michelle stood to the side, arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently. Her expression shifted slowly as she realized what he was watching. I kept glancing at her, and for the first time, she didn't seem so sure of herself. Her eyes narrowed, her mouth was drawn tight, and that clipboard she was holding, it had dropped just slightly lower, like it had lost some of its power. When the officer finished watching, he turned back to her. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "can you confirm for me you did not have the owner's permission to access the vehicle?" Michelle stiffened. "It's part of the HOA policy to inspect unauthorized vehicles." "That's not what I asked," the officer cut in gently. "Did the owner give you permission to try and open his vehicle?" There was a long pause. Finally, she muttered, "No, but I'm authorized to." "You're not authorized to touch private vehicles," he said firmly now. "Attempting to gain entry to someone's car without consent is considered unlawful entry. Regardless of your position with the HOA, this crosses a line." Michelle's jaw dropped slightly. "Wait, you're not taking his side, are you? I'm the one who called you. This neighborhood is under my management." The officer gave a tight smile. "And that does not put you above the law." Her arms dropped. "Are you saying I'm in trouble? We're trying to protect the community." I could see it happening. That moment where the weight of her actions hit her. Her face turned red, and the confidence in her voice wavered. The officer motioned for her to stand aside while he spoke into his radio. A few neighbors had started to gather now, quietly but noticeably. Phones were up, people whispered, and Michelle knew they were watching. "Ma'am," the officer said after a moment, "please place your hands behind your back." Her eyes went wide. "What are you arresting me?" "You're being detained for attempted unlawful entry into by a private vehicle. We'll sort out the charges at the station." She took a step back. No, this is a mistake. I'm the victim here. He's the one causing problems. You called us about an unauthorized vehicle, and it turns out it's fully legal and documented. What's unauthorized is your attempt to access it." She hesitated, but then, seeing no way out, she turned round slowly and allowed the cuffs to be placed on her wrists. Gasps from the crowd followed. Someone whispered finally. Another neighbor muttered. About time someone stood up to her. Michelle didn't say another word. The clipboard was on the ground now, abandoned like her illusion of power. She avoided eye contact with everyone, especially me. As the officer led her to the back of the cruiser, she tried one last plea. "Please, don't let this ruin my record. I didn't mean harm. I was just doing my job." But the door closed with a dull clunk, and silence settled over the block. The second officer, who had arrived quietly during all this, came over to me. "You handled that well," he said. I nodded. "Thank you for being fair about it." He handed me back my documents. "Your dashcam saved you a ton of trouble. Most people wouldn't believe a story like this if it wasn't caught on camera." As they drove off, neighbors began to disperse, some nodding at me in quiet approval. A few even clapped lightly, like justice had finally done its job. One older gentleman from across the street walked over. "About time someone stood up to Michelle," he said. "She's been pulling stunts like this for years. Glad you had that camera." I smiled. She picked the wrong truck. And in that moment, it hit me. Michelle wasn't just some annoying HOA figurehead anymore. She was a warning. When authority turns into entitlement, it's only a matter of time before it collapses on itself. And for Michelle, that collapse had just begun. The next morning, the neighborhood felt different. It was quieter, but not in a peaceful way. More like the calm after a thunderstorm, when everything is soaked, stirred, and waiting for what comes next. Michelle's arrest had sent a ripple through the entire community. People who normally never looked up from their lawn work were suddenly peeking over fences. Conversations that were usually about weather or football had turned into whispered questions. Did you see what happened yesterday? Do you think she'll be back? Is she really going to jail? I took a walk to the mailbox that morning, mostly to clear my head. The air still smelled like freshly cut grass, but it carried something else too: curiosity. Every person I passed gave me a longer glance than usual. A few nodded. One woman, Mrs. Sanders from 2 doors down, gave me a soft smile and said, "Good on you, sweetheart. That woman's been a problem for too long." I nodded politely, still feeling a little strange about everything. I hadn't meant to be part of any big neighborhood drama. I just wanted to wash my truck, mind my business, and be left alone. But somehow, that ordinary morning had turned into something else, something bigger. By noon, a few neighbors had gathered at the small park near the end of the block. I didn't plan to join them, but when Mr. Riley, the HOA treasurer, waved me over, I figured I should at least hear what was going on. "Listen," he said, keeping his voice low. "We're holding an emergency HOA meeting tonight. Without Michelle." "Without her?" I asked. "Is that allowed?" He chuckled dryly. "It is now. After what she pulled yesterday, she's suspended from all HOA duties. The rest of the board voted this morning. Even her closest allies turned." That surprised me, but not completely. Michelle had always ruled with more fear than respect. She didn't build loyalty, just silence. And now that she was in legal trouble, the silence was cracking. "What are you going to talk about at the meeting?" I asked. Riley hesitated, then looked around before answering. "We're starting a full review of all the policies she pushed through the last few years. There were ... complaints about how she used her authority, and your case just gave everyone the courage to speak up." That night, I decided to attend the meeting not because I was particularly interested in HOA politics, but because I wanted to understand what I had unintentionally started. The meeting was held in the community center. Normally, only a handful of residents showed up, but this time, the room was packed. People filled every chair. Some stood along the back wall. Riley called the meeting to order, but before he could even get through the agenda, hands shot up from every corner of the room. "I caught her snooping around my shed last month," one man said. "Told me it was an HOA inspection. She didn't even knock. She threatened to fine me for having my daughter's bike on the porch," a woman added. "Said it was clutter and a violation." "Who does that?" "She told me I couldn't fly a flag for Veterans Day," someone else said. "Said it wasn't a sanctioned holiday." "That woman has zero respect." The room came alive with stories, some small, some outrageous. Each one painted the same picture. Michelle had overstepped her authority for years, using fear and fake policies to bully residents. And no one had spoken up because they thought they were alone until now. Riley raised his hand and brought the room to order again. "We've heard enough," he said. "It's clear that Michelle created a hostile environment. She's under investigation now, both by the board and by law enforcement. From this point forward, we're scrapping every policy she pushed through that wasn't voted on properly." There was a round of applause, more than I expected. Then someone asked, "What about her position?" Riley nodded. "We're holding a special election in 2 weeks. Anyone interested in serving on the board can run fairly and with full transparency." I thought that was the end of it. But just as the meeting was winding down, a short woman near the front, Ms. Lee, who ran the neighborhood newsletter, stood up with a folder in her hand. "I think there's something else you should all see," she said. She handed the folder to Riley, who opened it, read a few lines, then passed it to the other board members. Their expressions turned from surprise to concern in seconds. "What is this?" someone asked. "Email records," Ms. Lee said, "from the HOA inbox. I used to help Michelle manage correspondence before she locked me out." She told the board the emails were about landscaping bids and scheduling repairs, but a lot of them were personal complaints, ones she handled on her own, without ever bringing them to a vote. Riley frowned. "She responded as the board, without consulting the board." "Exactly," Ms. Lee said. "She'll fine people for things we never approved. She denied applications, wrote fake violation notices, and even forged board signatures on letters." The room gasped. Even I felt my stomach twist a bit. Michelle hadn't just been bossy. She had been abusing her position in every way she could, right down to the paperwork. By the end of the meeting, it was clear this wasn't just about my truck. It was about years of control finally unraveling. People didn't just want Michelle removed, they wanted the whole system fixed. As I walked home under the streetlights, I passed her house. The windows were dark. No porch light, no movement. It felt like the end of a long, bitter chapter. I didn't feel triumphant, just relieved. Like I could breathe again. And even though I never asked to be part of this, I realized something important. That night, sometimes all it takes to stop a bully is one person saying no. The next week unfolded like something out of a slow-burning movie, quiet, tense, but with a sense that big changes were happening just beneath the surface. Michelle hadn't returned to her house. Her car was gone. Her porch light stayed off, and not a single curtain moved behind the windows. It was like she had vanished from the neighborhood entirely, and honestly, No one seemed to miss her. Word started to spread quickly. Michelle had been officially charged. According to someone who had a cousin working at the courthouse, she was facing 2 misdemeanors: unlawful attempted entry of a vehicle and impersonation of a public official. The first charge was straightforward. She'd been caught on camera trying to unlock my truck. The second, though, was more interesting. Apparently, using her HOA position as a justification for behavior that overstepped civil boundaries was considered impersonating legal authority in our state. She wasn't in jail, but she was under house arrest at her sister's place to towns, over awaiting her court date. That, of course, was the juicy headline everyone in the neighborhood whispered about. For someone who had made a career out of controlling others, being legally ordered to stay put under someone else's roof must have felt like poetic justice. I wasn't gloating, but I also wasn't sorry. Meanwhile, the HOA board, without Michelle breathing down their necks, was completely transformed. Meetings that had once been tightly controlled with stiff agendas and fake votes now turned into open forums. Neighbors actually showed up because, for the first time in years, they felt like they had a say. The board repealed nearly half of Michelle's made-up rules, including her infamous no bikes in porches policy, the limit on the number of flower pots per front yard, and the one that prohibited chalk art on sidewalks. Seriously, had banned sidewalk chalk. Even better, a few brave souls stepped up to run in the upcoming special election. People who genuinely wanted to help the community, not boss it around. One of them was Mr. Harris, the retired firefighter with the best lawn in the subdivision. Another was Natalie, a single mom and graphic designer who volunteered to make a new, easy-to-understand HOA rulebook. I even heard my name tossed around as a possible write-in candidate, but I quickly shut that down. I'd had enough drama to last a lifetime. Still, I couldn't help but feel a quiet pride that things were changing. And not just structurally, there was a sense of neighborliness returning. Kids started riding their bikes freely again. People planted flowers without worrying about color codes. Someone even painted a mural on the community mailbox wall a few weeks ago. That would have triggered a full investigation from Michelle. It made everyone smile. But while the community was healing, Michelle's case moved forward. I got a call one afternoon from the local police department. The officer I had spoken with during the incident wanted to follow up mostly about the dashcam footage. He asked if I'd be willing to submit it formally as evidence for court. I agreed without hesitation. A few days later, I was asked to come down to the courthouse as a witness. I won't lie, I was nervous. I'd never been involved in any kind of legal proceeding before. But when I walked into that small courtroom and saw Michelle sitting on the defendant's side, something shifted inside me. She didn't look like the woman who tried to break into my truck with smug confidence. She looked tired, pale, like someone who had spent too long pretending to be in control, and was finally realizing the cost. Her lawyer spoke first, making excuses, saying Michelle had acted out of community concern and had a history of strong neighborhood leadership. But when the judge asked if she had permission to access my vehicle, her lawyer had no real defense. The dashcam footage spoke for itself. When I was called to the stand, I told the truth. Calm, respectful, and to the point. I explained how Michelle had ignored my statements, tried to force open the door with a random key, triggered the alarm, and then called the police to cover herself. I also mentioned how she had claimed the truck fell under HOA jurisdiction just because it wasn't on her clipboard. The judge nodded, taking notes. The prosecution rested quickly after that. Michelle was found guilty on both counts, but since this was her first offense, the judge sentenced her to probation, community service, and a formal restraining order. She was banned from holding any position of authority in an HOA for 5 years. That last part got a few raised eyebrows in the room. After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse feeling strangely light, not victorious, just finished, like a chapter had closed. I didn't see Michelle on the way out. She stayed seated, staring down at her lap. Back in the neighborhood, people were already talking about what had happened. The news spread quickly, as things like that do in tight communities. But there was no celebration, just a quiet agreement that justice that had been done. A week later, a moving truck showed up at Michelle's house. Her sister came by and started packing things. No one saw Michelle herself, and by the end of the day, the blinds were down and the house stood empty. Just like that, the storm that had hovered over our streets for years was gone. We had survived. Michelle, not just her rules, but her grip on our community. And we had done it not by shouting or fighting, but by standing firm, telling the truth, and refusing to be intimidated. Sometimes the biggest victories come not from loud battles, but from quiet courage. Spring rolled into the neighborhood like a long overdue sigh of relief. The trees were greener, the sidewalks were livelier, and something invisible but important had shifted. The fear and tension that used to settle over the houses like fog were gone. In their place was something warmer, something real. Community. Michelle's house sat quietly for weeks after the moving truck left. Then, one sunny morning, a young couple arrived with paint cans and measuring tape. They smiled, waved at every neighbor they passed, and even asked if anyone had tips about where to get the best pizza nearby. That same house, once a symbol of rules and tension, was now the home of laughter and open windows. It was almost poetic how quickly things changed when the right people moved in. And it wasn't just them. The whole neighborhood seemed to be rewriting itself. The special HOA election brought in an entirely new board, people who led with listening, not lecturing. Mr. Harris was elected president unanimously. Natalie became the secretary, and her new HOA guidebook was so clear and friendly that people actually read it. She even added a welcome letter for new families, complete with neighborhood fun facts and dog park locations, that there were no more mysterious violation notices taped to front doors, no more whispered warnings about someone getting on Michelle's list. In fact, someone made a joke during the first spring block party that the only list people wanted to be on now was the one for free lemonade refills. That block party, a month after Michelle's court sentencing, was the biggest the neighborhood had ever seen. Kids ran freely through sprinklers, chalk art lined the sidewalks, and every family brought a dish to share. I brought my truck and let the kids climb inside after cleaning it up, of course. One little boy asked, "Is this the truck that caught the bad lady?" I smiled and said, "Kind of." But really, it helped stop something bad from continuing. That moment stuck with me because, in a way, that truck, something I built from the ground up with my own hands, had become more than just a vehicle. It became a turning point, a symbol, a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary things can stand against the loudest injustices, as long as you're willing to hold your ground. One afternoon a few weeks later, I found myself back on the porch, with a coffee in hand. It was just like the morning this all started. The sunlight hit the truck just right, birds chirped overhead, and everything felt calm, peaceful, whole. My neighbor, Mrs. Sanders, walked by and waved. "Still proud of that truck, huh?" she said with a grin. I chuckled. "I guess I am." "Well," she added, "we're all a little prouder of you, too. You didn't just fix up a truck, you helped fix this whole place." That meant more than she probably realized. Before all this, I kept to myself. I didn't care much about HOA meetings or neighbor politics. I figured if I stayed out of everyone's way, they'd do the same. But when Michelle crossed the line, when she used her position to bully, intimidate, and control, it forced me to speak up. And speaking up didn't just protect, it opened a door for others to do the same. That's how change starts. Not always with big speeches or fights, but with a single person who says, "This isn't right," and refuses to back down. As the weeks turned 2 months, the neighborhood didn't just recover, it thrived. Families who used to avoid each other now chatted daily. The park had more kids than ever. A community garden popped up near the back fence where the HOA shed used to be. Even the crankiest old man on the block now gave out popsicles on hot days. What had once been a rule-obsessed, paper-fine-pushing neighborhood had become something beautiful. A place where people looked out for each other, laughed together, and lived freely. And Michelle, she faded into a name from the past. A warning, maybe, but not a threat. The day her restraining order arrived in the mail, I opened it and glanced over the formal language. No contact, no HOA involvement, no proximity to the neighborhood. That paper was the final chapter in her story here. I folded it, tucked it away, and went back to my life, because this wasn't Michelle's neighborhood anymore, it was ours. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this true story of justice and community strength, be sure to like, share, and comment your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel Bright Reality for more real stories that matter.